Hello and welcome. My name is Kevin Weiss from Hamburg University of Applied Sciences. Working with Michel, Professor Schmidt, and Professor Velez, I would like to present the findings of PHiLIP and its pursuit for multi-platform peripheral testing on low-cost embedded MCUs running RIOT OS. The journey of an embedded developer can be difficult, requiring knowledge of both hardware and software. It can be challenging to get hardware to perform as expected, from toggling a GPIO to communicating with other hardware via complex bus sequences. Hardware implementations widely vary, leading to many possible problems. Improper state changes, uninitialized registers, misconfigured clocks, incorrect component values, broken wires, the sun which happens to flood an IR sensor at a specific time of day. Thus, hardware abstraction layers and OSs have been built to ease the heavy burden. For example, RIOT OS, a popular OS for 8 to 32-bit embedded devices, provides many features such as peripheral abstractions, device drivers, reusable modules, mature code that works out of the box. However, providing an OS solution comes with its own particularities. OS complexity may start off simple, with a countable number of combinations of drivers, modules, and hardware. However, as both the supported platforms and required coding complexity grow, so do the hurdles of maintaining and testing. Manually testing each feature on each platform with each sensor soon becomes unmaintainable. Simulation unit testing and usage may cover many cases, but fails to prove the actual hardware interactions are operating as instructed. So we wondered, can we simplify complexity by isolating and verifying all hardware interactions? Thus, PHiLIP, the peripheral hardware in the loop integration product, was created. PHiLIP is qualified open source firmware and tooling that can be used with off-the-shelf development kits, such as the Bluepill or Nucleo F103RB, to provide in-depth testing of various peripherals. The development kits were chosen due to the low cost, availability, and peripheral hardware. The interface to PHiLIP is done with a Python wrapper called PHiLIP, which provides both an interactive shell for developers and scripting capabilities for interfacing with test frameworks. Similar to sensors or MCUs, PHiLIP uses a memory map type interface to access parameters such as I2C read count, or set parameters such as force data NAC. This map can easily be updated with our Memory Map Manager tool, allowing one configuration to change the C code, documentation, and the Python interface. The peripherals of PHiLIP, such as GPIOs, UART, SPI, and I2C, are wired to a DUT, device under test, of any form factor, in our case flashed with RIOT OS-based testing firmware. Similar to PHiLIP, the DUT PAL provides an interface to the testing framework. PHiLIP and the DUT use a serial connection to a developer's host computer or test node. The test node coordinates PHiLIP and the DUT by running the test suites using a structured testing convention, exposing peripheral APIs. For our deployment, the test node is a Raspberry Pi with a custom breakout hat to help with wiring. All third-party tools used in our deployment are open source. The tests utilize Robot Framework, a keyword-based testing language. Jenkins is used for the CI portion to manage, trigger, and synchronize the test nodes, and Ansible is used to manage the infrastructure and commissioning new test nodes. There are several racks full of boards deployed in our server room. We have over 24 unique boards running in our CI. These boards are from various vendors such as ST, Silicon Labs, Extensa, TI, Microchip, etc. Our wiring scheme allows flexibility for more than a single form factor and the ability to adapt wiring as configuration changes. We include a wide variety of MCU architectures to cover as many peripheral implementations as possible. We currently are running 96 test cases over 7 test suites, resulting in 7 flash cycles per run per board. The deployment has been growing and operating for 2 years without burning out the flash, providing feedback to the RIOT OS community. The costs for both developer use and the CI deployment were designed to fit the range of the DUT cost. Having a low-cost solution for testing encourages community participation, enabling board contributors to provide CI support. The desktop costs consist of the developer's computer as the test node, the cost of a Nucleo F103 RB, and the developer time to wire and run tests. The CI costs consist of a Raspberry Pi as the test node, build server time, wear and tear, the custom breakout hat, and a blue pill. The DOT is shown separately to compare overhead costs. PHiLIP is useful when dealing with peripheral API reworks. The initial deployment of PHiLIP was introduced during a month-long I2C API rework in RIOT OS. During this, PHiLIP expanded test capabilities by forcing hard-to-trigger failures. For example, occasionally a sensor may unreliably NAC a data byte. PHiLIP provided the NAC during testing, making results more deterministic. PHiLIP caught bugs that were not detected via conventional testing. On the SAM0 platform, an extra byte was being read and ignored. PHiLIP enforced the correct byte count via the I2C read byte count parameter. PHiLIP can record DUT GPIO pin toggles with 14 nanosecond resolution, allowing very low overhead instrumentation down to a single cycle. As a result, timing accuracy tests and micro benchmarking can be run on a much shorter timescale. This can also expose various timing issues, such as incorrect clock prescaler configuration and wrong oscillator selection. For example, we can see that the SAM-L10X Pro and the SAM-R21 boards are out of spec, indicating a clock configuration issue. It can also show very short timing deviations that may be hidden from longer tests. Fast results are important as running tests from the CI still require access to a limited resource. Thus, the total test time should be considered in the setup. Currently, the nightly tests, which run all tests on all boards, takes around 45 minutes. This leaves ample headroom to complete within the night. Taking a closer look at each test step, we see that flashing the boards take a relatively short amount of time, around 4 to 10 seconds. The execution step, where the tests are actually run, generally take a short amount of time as well, with the exception of UR tests due to long transfers with a low baud rate. The bottleneck is the setup step. This is where a reset is provided to get the DUT and PHiLIP into an initial state and then establish communication. With parallel execution, our deployment easily scales when adding boards. However, adding additional test cases will increase the overall time due to the execution and setup time. Since much of the work was practical, we draw lessons from our deployment experience. Some lessons are related to the concept itself, while others are specific to the setup. By using an MCU as a reference, rather than an FPGA, we ran into some limitations of instrumentation requiring dedicated operating modes as a workaround. However, since MCUs allow easier changes and fits the community expertise, the benefits outweigh the limitations. Some API calls require being called in a time-critical sequence. Due to the external control overhead, these sequences must be wrapped in a separate command or added to a queue. The setup issues we experienced were PHiLIP Bluebell boards lacking accurate oscillators, causing a limit to timing accuracy measurements. Sourcing from trusted vendors would fix this problem. Some DOTs had intermittent failures on the USB to serial connection. Retries could help with this. Flashing tools may not be readily available on the CI test node, requiring compiling flashers from sources or using alternative flashing methods. Additionally, occasionally flashing lockups occur due to improper debugger configuration or sleep modes, which requires our CI to repower the board or toggle the reset pins to recover. In our paper, we point out the lack of hardware nuances and insufficient support of emulators. In future work, we consider using PHiLIP as an emulated device virtually connected to a DUT to allow even more scalability. The hardware tests can be used to qualify the emulated results. Coupled with selective testing and binary comparison, this would help us minimize hardware usage time and costs for the equivalent results. Providing code coverage feedback from emulated DUTs would be simpler. However, using special debuggers and running something like ARM's embedded trace macro cell would show true coverage. With well-documented computer-readable APIs and a model built on the peripheral abstraction, automated test generation can be achieved with fuzzy inputs using the model as the test oracle. All sources for PHiLIP, design files, wiring, CI configurations, and design notes are publicly available at philip.riot-apps.net. Thanks for listening to our presentation, and a special thanks to the reviewers for their valuable feedback.